Good morning and welcome to Oulton Park for rounds 9 and 10 of TCR UK. We've got the small matter of qualifying coming up in just a few minutes here from Oulton Park, and a whole load of excitement going up and down this wall as well, as we have two brand new drivers joining us here for the championship. Now, Oulton Park is a rather special circuit. The weather here is pretty sweltering today, as I'm sure you can imagine. It's quite sweaty where we are, which is always nice for these poor drivers about to get into the cars. But it is a beautiful, beautiful circuit, and one that I know our commentator Andy McEwen holds in a certain high regard. And yesterday I caught up with him and found out exactly why he loves it so much, and here's what he said. So we're here looking over Cascades, which is where you first came and saw your first ever race here at Oulton Park.
Yeah, the tender age of 5 years old, almost exactly in this spot actually, and I remember it well. It was the day I fell in love with the sport, and that's one of the reasons why this place is so special to me. You know, it all began here. I did my first ever circuit commentary in the box over there at Knickerbrook. It's got so many memories for me, and as a local lad, I'm really glad to be here this weekend.
What makes it so magical? What stands out?
It's just so different. You know, we are so used these days to these big Formula One circuits, and they have their own thing going on, but this has a certain charm that places like that lack. You know, there are no acres of tarmac runoff area. They've got brilliant facilities, don't get me wrong, but this just has a bit of character that some circuits lack. The drivers love it, the fans love it as well. For the drivers, it's one of their favourites. They all call it the mini Nürburgring, and you can see why. It's tight, it's narrow, it's undulating, and it's unforgiving. You've got to treat this place with some real respect, because if you go off, you're probably going to damage your car and damage your pride as well. So they really have to be careful. But when they get it right, there's nowhere more satisfying. Yeah,
well, this place wasn't actually built on an old airfield, so it's got its own story behind it as well. They actually looked at the landscape. I know they had to approach the owner of the old manor here years ago to try and get it built, so it's got a different story to how it came about.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the run-up Deers Leap over the start-finish line, that was the driveway to the old hall. The lodge, of course, is still there, that iconic shot that you always get of the cars coming out of Lodge Corner with the big lodge in the background. You know, there are snippets of the history of this place dotted all around. And actually, the basic outline of the circuit hasn't changed that much. They added the far end of the circuit, which we're using this weekend, not that long, actually, after the place opened in the first place. And really, apart from there are a few less trees these days, it really hasn't changed.
So what are the unique corners? What were the biggest struggles that all of our drivers are going to face here?
There is no such thing as an easy corner here, that's the problem, but the corner behind us, Cascades, that's really tricky. Downhill braking zone, it's bumpy as well. You've got the camber going through the corner, but then it falls away on the exit, so it's very easy to run wide, damage your car on the runoff area. Then Island Bend at the end of the Lakeside Straight, one of the few really quick left-hand corners in the UK, and it goes on and on and on. If you run wide, you get a wheel on the grass, that's it, you're off the road. And then, you know, up at Druids, that double apex right-hander under the trees. If there's a bit of rain, a bit of drizzle in the air, that's always the slipperiest part of the circuit. It's a tricky double apex right-hander, and it's quick. And again, no runoff area. So wherever you go around this circuit, there are challenging corners and great views for the spectators. You can see the panoramic view we've got behind us here. Wherever you go here, you're going to enjoy yourself.
Yeah, it's one of those things, isn't it, that once you get into motorsport, you always remember the first race you saw, and Andy can remember. Apparently, his dad was telling me earlier on, his dad's here at Oulton Park. He actually said that as a 5-year-old, Andy was standing there commentating all the racing, and all the fans around were just really getting into it, that Andy was loving it so much, and we can't shut him up. We haven't shut him up ever since, actually. We stand here in the garages looking at the cars as they get ready to go out for qualifying, and a little bit of light work has been done, as we can see, to Lewis's car right now, and that was because in the practice session this morning, Lewis had a slight problem with his car. Now, he's just come into the garage, so I'm going to grab him very quickly. We'll have a quick word. Lewis, let's grab you here quickly. So, bit of work being done to your car. Tell us what's going on and why.
Yeah, we went out for FP1 this morning. We did 7 laps, I think it was. Got down to, well, I was on my in lap for another tyre change, another setup change, to see if we could change anything on the car. Got down to the first hairpin, and I just felt something wrong with the car on the left-hand side. Come through the corner, thought I'll ease off, lean back, made my way all the way around to the last corner. I knew my wheel wasn't right. Got to the last corner, come down the dip, and as I got down at the bottom of the dip, I just felt a crunch, and I just saw sparks in my wheel travelling down the straight. But no, the team were working hard, worked very well on the car, getting it back together, and hopefully we'll be back out for qualifying.
Fair enough. Now, I was told that it might be something to do with the powder coating issue, bizarrely.
Yeah, with the powder coating, it depends on how well it's done. If it's not done right, the powder coating will get very, very hot and then soften up. So obviously, even though you can drill the nuts on it as much as you want, then it will still get soft and make the nuts being able to loosen off and come off. So obviously that could have made the wheel loose and then just rattle about and snap the wheel nuts off. But No, it could be that. It could be anything. We did a pit stop before that and changed the wheels. It depends on what they're saying and what could have happened. There's a million things that could have happened to it.
Yeah, absolutely. Luckily, all that's happened is that your team work on it. And it looks like it's going to be ready for qualifying. At least we hope so.
Yeah, it should be. It should be. We're working hard on it, and I've got a great team behind me. But hopefully they'll be able to put it back together. I'll be out for qualifying.
And with regards to qualifying pace and race pace, I know you had a bit of an unofficial test here yesterday, as many of the drivers did. How did you find your time out here?
Yeah, it's my first ever time at the track, so I'm not too sure what the track's like. Yesterday was the first time. I found a second this morning from my yesterday's time. So if we can do that again in qualifying, we'll be top 5, top 6-ish. So if I can get up to there, I know I'm better in racing than I am at qualifying. So if I'm top 5 or top 6, I'll be happy and I can push my way through for the race, hopefully.
Great stuff, Will. Keep an eye on it. Good luck. Thanks there to Lewis. So as we head a little bit further down, a few stories developing actually on the grid. So as we wander this way, can't see the car just yet, but Tim Docker is a new addition to the lineup, to the grid. We've got Tim Docker joining in a Golf. Now, this is the Golf he used in Britcar, so he's driven it even. It's easier to drive than ride these things. He's driven this car only a couple of times, a couple of race meetings. Before that, he was in the VW Cup before that. So it's the first time really he's raced this car, because he was in the Scirocco in the VW Cup, but he's been racing the Golf a couple of times. He's moved to this series, and so he says, by his own admission, relatively new to it. He was struggling to find pace yesterday, but that is to be expected when you're getting a brand new car or a car that you've hardly ever driven. And talking about drivers getting in a brand new car they've hardly ever driven, if we wander this way, really making the poor camera guy James work here. So if we head this way, we have one other driver who's new on the grid. We're getting a lot of brand new drivers here in TCR, which is fantastic. New additions to it. If you just glance to your right-hand side there now, you see Jen shaking hands with Ash Sutton. So a touring car champion, a reigning touring car champion, has made his way over to TCR UK to give it a whirl. He is in Finley Crocker's Honda Civic. See Josh Files here as well, giving him a bit of help. But Ollie Taylor is, as always, looking very, very fast. Ash Sutton, who wasn't actually supposed to be here until today, he arrived yesterday evening. He'd been working with the Clio Cup, where he does mentoring and training in the Clio Cup. He was at Silverstone yesterday. He finished a little bit earlier and made his way to Oulton Park, where he stepped into that car pretty much immediately, got into his race gear, got in the car and put in a fastest lap when it came to that unofficial practice. So it's pretty amazing to think that straight away Ash Sutton has found that car and it's working for him, and we know he's got amazing pace. It's the first time in a long time that he's been here at Oulton Park and raced on the international circuit as well. He's done the island many, many times, but when it comes to the international circuit, it was new, but he's found it immediately, and he's looking very, very quick. So when we look at the other drivers up and down the grid, particularly people like Dan Lloyd, who we know is always very fast, and we expect to be leading the way as we wander this way and try not to get run over. Yeah, Dan Lloyd, who we normally expect to be right at the sharp end, has now got his work cut out with both Ash Sutton and with Ollie Taylor, who was actually telling me as well, it's great because they do share a lot of data between these two, the Pyro Motorsport drivers, and so they're sharing a lot of information, and I expect to see both of these very much at the sharp end. We heard from Lewis, didn't we, just a few moments ago, and he said that he's not too sure about his qualifying pace, but race pace is certainly very strong. And as we head a little bit further back here, we can see Stuart Lyons in the distance in the Cupra, and he's another driver that really does lack qualifying pace, but when it comes to race pace, he's pretty confident. And he actually said to me before we started rolling today that he thinks when it comes to race pace, he's going to be right up there. So very, very confident. We know that Carl Swift is very fast as well. Carl Swift got his first ever podium in TCR UK last time out. And so he's also riding the crest of a wave. In the distance, you have the three Golfs, Dan Lloyd and the two Backmans. And then a bit further back as well, it's great to see this. We have got some Alfa Romeos. We have two Alfa Romeos here, and as we avoid getting run over, you can see the Alphas coming out in just a few moments. So this is Derek Palmer and Rob Gilmore. Now, we saw Rob Gilmore twice, really, but he's not started any race. 4 races he's attempted to start, not started a single one, and hopefully we'll see him out here today. They've actually had to do a bit of a brake change. So they've had to put new brake discs on that car because he was finding it very hard to stop. So they've done that. So we're going to see Rob go out. He'll run a couple of laps on those brakes, come back in, they'll change tyres around, and then he'll be back out for a flyer. So as the cars now leave and make their way onto the track, it's time to start the qualifying session and hand over to our commentator, Andy McEwen. Andy's mic at the moment. We should be hearing him, but we're not, so we'll try and get Andy to you very, very quickly. But as we look around here at the minute, all the teams, all the drivers, all the teams currently just waiting for their drivers to come back in. They'll be doing a tyre change pretty early on. They'll go around, get some heat in the tyres. Because they're all front-wheel drives, of course, they'll be changing the rears to the fronts pretty quickly, actually. And we've got one car coming in straight away. And here comes Stuart Lyons immediately into the pits. Like I say, this could just be a pretty standard change, actually. This could be just rears to the fronts because of getting the heat in those tyres. Now, we have another car coming in right now, and that is Carl Swift, probably doing exactly the same process. We're going to see a lot of action as the cars do come in for the first few minutes here, because when it comes to the qualifying, it is a case of doing fronts to backs, and that's pretty much what every single one is going to be doing right now. They're moving those rear tyres to the front just to get extra grip. Fresh rubber going on here onto Carl's tyre, onto Carl's car.
Hello, Bryn. I'm hoping you can hear me now. And in the pit lane. Apologies for that, ladies and gentlemen. I believe that you weren't hearing my thoughts on the start of this qualifying session initially, but I think we've got everything sorted out now, so apologies for that. This is the first qualifying session that we've streamed all year so far on TCR UK. It's great to be here and be able to take advantage of this slightly different format this weekend here at Oulton Park, where everything's sort of condensed into one day. So qualifying and practice in the morning and 2 races in the afternoon. So we have had a free practice session already this morning. Ash Sutton was fastest in that free practice session by just over half a second ahead of this man, Ollie Taylor, who was second quickest. Ollie, of course, who got that first race win of the season at Castle Combe last time out. Dan Lloyd, runaway championship leader, only 3rd quickest in practice this morning. So things are starting to change around slightly now in TCR UK. A slight changing of the guard, perhaps, at the front of the field. Dan has been struggling slightly for pace this weekend because, remember, he is carrying that 60 kilos of success ballast or compensation weight, as it's known in TCR racing, because, of course, he was winning every race that was going in the early part of the season. So he's been handed this 60 kilo compensation weight, which he was carrying at Castle Combe. Ollie Taylor was then able to take advantage of that and win a race. That, though, proved that the FK7 shaped Civic was equally capable of winning races. So he too has been handed now 20 kilos of compensation weight. So there's a 40 kilo difference between the Civic and the Golf, with the Civic still being the lighter of the two. And that is making things very interesting here at Oulton Park. Oulton Park is by far and away the hardest circuit on the calendar to carry the ballast out, because as you can see, it's so undulating. We've got all of these, the rise and fall, and a lot of the acceleration points from the really slow corners, such as this section of the circuit that Ollie Taylor is negotiating now, out of Knickerbrook Corner. You'll see we go out of this tight right-hander and then accelerate steeply uphill. And if you're carrying 60 kilos of compensation weight in the car, that makes a big, big difference. So we are not expecting a Dan Lloyd runaway this weekend. The field is a lot tighter than it has been so far. But of course, this is the first time all weekend long that the drivers will have gone out there on fresh front tyres. They'll be going as quickly as they possibly can. To give you an idea of the reference point for lap times, the fastest time from practice this morning was a 1:42.8 by Ash Sutton. So Ash Sutton, a 1:42.8. At the moment, we've not yet seen those representative lap times because they're doing, as Bryn was just talking us through, they're doing their tyre rotation at the moment. So they go out there, they bed the tyres in. They often go out with the front tyres on the rear of the car, the rear tyres on the front, because of course a front-wheel drive touring car warms up its front tyres significantly quicker than it warms up its rear tyres, and you need that front-end grip. So they warm up the front tyres, they swap them over, and then you've got equal grip across both ends of the car. So that's what they're doing now. The early times that are being set, only Ash Sutton and Ollie Taylor have actually set a time, and both of those times were quite a bit slower than we'd expect them to be later on. There is one of our 2 new drivers in the championship this weekend, Tim Docker, former VW Cup racer, and he recently acquired this TCR VW Golf and has been slowly but surely getting the Golf GTI up to speed, and it's great to have him here. Another new name in the TCR UK paddock. Carl Swift is a name that we're very familiar with, and one of the things that you may not have known about that happened after Castle Combe, if you cast your minds back 3 weeks to our previous rounds, Carl Swift finished on the podium in race number 2, but had a time penalty for exceeding the track limits. Now that time penalty was then rescinded and he was put back onto the podium. So Carl got his first ever podium of the season. We thought he was going to get it at Brands Hatch, had that tragic car issue towards the end of that second race, ended up pulling off into retirement, and it was great that he was finally able to get that first podium at the reverse grid race at Castle Combe. Last time out, he's all out of shape through Truids though. That's that tricky double apex left-hander that I was talking about earlier on, where you have to send the car in as quickly as you can, but if you haven't quite got the rear tyres with the temperature, it can very easily catch you out. Then they're on the brakes down in towards Lodge Corner. This is the final corner on the track. Now let's see if Carl is about to go onto a flying lap. He's certainly pushing hard. I think this is going to be our first proper flying lap of the session beginning, and he's got his Maximum Motorsport teammate Stuart Lyons in behind him. Now Stuart Lyons has just completed the flying lap. It was 1:44.7, so Stuart has just gone fastest in the session, but to give you an idea, that is his fastest lap of the day so far. Here's a replay of Carl Swift. That's definitely exceeding the track limits coming out of Lodge Corner. Needs to be careful about that, because if you do that in a qualifying session, you will have that lap time disallowed, so he needs to be careful not to do that when he actually gets onto a real flyer. Ash Sutton then, reigning British Touring Car Champion, the 2015 Renault Clio champion, of course. He may have won his BTCC title in a rear-wheel drive car, but he has had championship-winning pedigree in front-wheel drive cars before. There is our championship leader, Dan Lloyd. The story to tell for Dan, as far as Castle Combe was concerned, that race 1 penalty, which saw him demoted from first to second after last lap contact with Ollie Taylor, meant that he won on the road, but he was then dropped back down into second place and also given a 15-point championship points penalty. So actually, the gap between he and Ollie Taylor has come down considerably. It's still a fairly sizable gap, but that's sort of that's lit the fire underneath Ollie Taylor, I think, and he's realised that actually he can beat Dan Lloyd on the track, he can take the fight to him, and who knows, with still 6 races to go in the TCR UK Championship, and remember we score points in qualifying as well, there are 91 points available at each meeting of the year. 3 of those meetings left, there are ample points left on the table for Ollie Taylor to really take the fight to Ash Sutton this year. There's Andreas Beckman working his way through. He won the simulator challenge here at Oulton Park yesterday evening. That was something that most of the drivers took part in. There was a simulator provided by AIM Technologies in one of the pit garages. They all had a go, and Andreas Beckman set the fastest time of the evening. And as a result, he's going to have a pretty nifty prize handed his way a bit later on, which we'll cover later on in the day. But yeah, Andreas Beckman, considering it's the first time he's ever driven here, is clearly getting to grips with the place fairly quickly. Looks like he's about to go onto a flying lap down towards Lodge Corner, but you can see that this bedding in of the tyres takes some time. I mean, we're nearly a third of the way through the session now, and we haven't really had a representative lap time in yet. So Andreas Beckman goes onto a lap now. It'll be interesting to follow him round then as he heads down towards Old Hall Corner. We'll start to see now whether he's got the rear tyre temperature up. It looks like he has. The car's a little bit twitchy, but we've had a lap time disallowed for somebody I'm seeing on the timing screen as well, so track limits already becoming a slight issue. Andreas Beckman then through Cascades, off down the lakeside straight, and you can see the spectacular view of the lake in the background there. This is a really unique circuit, lots of greenery and lots of spectacular sights all around the circuit. Really is a fan and driver favourite. There's Ash Sutton, looks like he's also now on a flying lap, so we should start to see some representative lap times coming in shortly. Ash Sutton, we believe, set that lap time this morning in free practice on new-ish front tyres. You'd imagine he's out on a set of stickers now in this early stage of qualifying as he works his way down out of the Shell hairpin in towards the British chicane. Look at the way they monster the curbs through there. Great shot. Oh, a little bit wide over the grass. That's just on the limits of exceeding the track limits. So as Ashley Sutton makes his way over the clay hill underneath the Oulton Park Bridge, I believe we can head down to the pit lane with Bryn.
Yeah, thanks very much, Andy. I have news, and I have news and I have no news at the same time. Basically, the Alphas have both come past us, and I've gone and spoken to the team, and they say the cars are working absolutely beautifully. There's no problems whatsoever to report. So it looks like, for the first time that we've seen this season, both of the Alphas are running as they should. So hopefully we'll see them start to climb the order as the qualifying session continues and progresses.
Yeah, thank you, Bryn. So Ashley Sutton then, as we were talking, has just set the fastest lap of the session, 1 minute 42.348. He's nearly a second and a half quicker than Andreas Beckman, who crossed the line just before him. But we are now starting to see some lap times come in. Ollie Taylor has gone third quickest, Jessica Beckman fourth, and Lewis Kent in fifth. But that is 42.3 for Ash Sutton. That is half a second quicker than he went in practice this morning. So Ash Sutton is really now starting to pick up the pace, and that is a really impressive lap time. His first sector on the next lap is not quite as quick as it has been. However, Andreas Beckman, Jessica Beckman and Ollie Taylor have all, well, in fact, Andreas and Ollie in particular, both doing personal best first sectors on their next laps. They could be about to improve. Now, Dan Lloyd is sat down in the pit lane. He hasn't yet set a lap time in this session. I wouldn't be overly concerned about this because he did this in Castle Combe, because remember, the second fastest lap times from this qualifying session will set the grid for race number 2. However, it's not quite that straightforward. We take the second fastest lap time and then we reverse them. And so, in theory, if you set one really fast lap time and then one not so fast lap time, you can get yourself a good grid position for both. That's what Dan tried to do at Castle Combe, and it really worked for him. He got himself a front row starting position for both races. So that may well be the tactic we're seeing Dan employ here at Oulton Park as well. There's Derek Palmer in the Alfa Romeo Giulietta. We haven't really been able to see all that much of these two cars lately. Bryn documented their various mechanical woes that they've had this season, but Derek Palmer and this man, Rob Gilmore, both very quick when the car is working. We've never doubted that. They just can't seem to get the car to work for all that long, but fingers crossed this weekend they've been showing some real flashes of pace. That was a big lock-up there, though, for Rob. And so this lap time not going particularly to plan. At the moment, Rob is 8th quickest, Derek is 6th quickest, and they're only separated by 3/10 from each other. So the Alphas run by DPE Motorsport, Derek Palmer Seniors team, and they are both looking pretty rapid out there. However, I'm seeing a message on my timing screen that says, oh, that's another big lock up. Rob Gilmore always is spectacular when he's out on the circuit. We noticed that back at Brands Hatch. Yes, the message I'm seeing on my timing screen is that Derek Palmer Senior, the team manager of DPE Motorsports, is being summoned to see the headmaster. The race control wants to have a word with him, and what that might be about, I'm not too sure. It could be that his drivers are exceeding the track limits once too often, and they will get a bit of a slap on the wrist for doing that. And as I said, lap times will be disallowed from the session. So currently, Ashley Sutton is fastest, Andreas Beckman is second, Ollie Taylor is third, Jessica Beckman is fourth, and Lewis Kent in the Hyundai i30 is fifth quickest. Derek Palmer is sixth, Stuart Lyne seventh, Rob Gilmore, the man on the screens, is eighth quickest, Carl Swift is ninth, and Tim Docker rounds out the 10 drivers who have set a time so far. Car number 95, Stuart Lyne's now having a lap time disallowed, however. Doesn't affect his position though, I don't think, as we now get this brief lull in the middle of the session as everybody comes in, goes on to a new set of tyres. So they'll use one set of tyres for their first run, and now they'll get a second run at it on a slightly fresher set of tyres. There, though, is Dan Lloyd. Well, there is Andreas Beckman, but the car in front of him is his teammate Dan Lloyd. So Dan has now gone out there, ready to set a time. There he's going back to the pit lane by the looks of it. So Andreas Beckman will go on to a flying lap. Dan Lloyd comes into the pit lane, and Andreas crosses the line. That wasn't a bad lap, a 1:44.0. It's not quite an improvement, but his middle sector was a personal best. So Andreas looks like he's on it at the moment. Out of Old Hall Corner he goes, down the avenue, through this tricky right-hand kink at Denton's, which really unsettles the car under braking down in towards Cascades, which is where they are now, through this heavily cambered left-hander. Careful not to run out onto the grass, though. That's what Lewis Kent did yesterday in one of the test sessions and damaged the front of his car quite heavily. Andreas, though, has no such issues. What's his first sector like? It's not exactly setting the world alight, and he's got Ollie Taylor on an outlap on cold tyres right in front of him. I'm sure Ollie will see him coming, though, and try his best to stay out of the way. Yes, he is. So Ollie moves over to the right-hand side of the road. But Andreas Beckman is, so far, not on a personal best lap. We'll wait to see what middle sector's like. That's sometime over the top of Hill Top, which is where they're heading now. Andreas has just had a lap time disallowed, however, for exceeding track limits at turn 1, Old Hall Corner. There are pressure pads on the exit of some of the corners at this circuit. If you run out over them, it triggers a camera, it takes a picture of you, so that when you go to the clerk of course and try and claim your innocence, there's no real way of fighting against the track limits rule, because there's visual evidence there to show that you did indeed exceed the track limits and your lap time should be disallowed. So Andreas has just had a lap time disallowed. This particular lap has not been going particularly well, it must be said. No real improvement. But I'm noticing that with the exception of Ash Sutton, the lap times are extremely close. From second place Andreas Beckman, all the way down to 8th place Rob Gilmore. Only 1 second covers the bulk of the field. So, and Ash Sutton is absolutely showing everyone else how it's done at the moment, but everybody else behind very close together indeed, which bodes well for the racing later on. Now, Dan Lloyd has recently been back into the pit lane again, presumably to swap the tyres over. But he's only leaving himself 13 minutes to get out there and put in a really quick lap time. But I do suspect that he might be trying to do this one quick lap and then one not so quick lap, and he'll then be trying to get the pole position possibly for both races. Well, Dan, we can see out on the circuit, down in the pit lane with some news on the man himself, I believe, is Brim.
Yeah, thanks, Andy. I was just talking to the team about Dan Lloyd, actually, about what's going on with his car. If we have a look at the timing, he's currently way back there in 11th place, and he's put in a really poor 3:07. He's only run 5 laps so far. So I was talking to the team, and they've had to change the brakes. So what happened was they were having a problem with vibration through the front brakes there, and it seems they've got slightly warped discs or something going on. So they've replaced the brake discs again, and they're hoping that this will alleviate the problem there. So that's why Dan is so far down. They've adjusted the brakes, they've changed them over, so fingers crossed that he'll be out there putting in a flyer.
Right, thanks for that, Bryn. That's interesting because here I am saying that this was all a tactic and it was all part of the plan, and it does seem like the plan for Dan Lloyd is rather unravelling this weekend. He's not got the ultimate pace, and his brake issues that have basically cost him the first 2/3 of this session. So I think we're about to see him go on to his first flying lap of the session. It will be really interesting to watch the sector times as we go through. Most of the other cars are in the pit lane, so let's see if we can stick with Dan as he now starts to build the speed up. The championship leader on 342 points. That is 78 points clear of Ollie Taylor at the moment in the championship. But as I said, with 91 points available each weekend, and importantly, 11 points available for qualifying on pole position. So whoever's quickest at the end of this session takes 11 championship points. That could be really valuable for either Dan or Ollie or Andreas, any of the top drivers in the championship. It could really help their championship fight. Change towards the top of the timing screen to let you know about, by the way. Ollie Taylor, as I was speaking about him, has just gone second fastest. So Ollie Taylor leaps himself ahead of the Beckmans and gets himself onto the front row. So it's a Pyro Motorsport 1-2 at the moment. There's Jessica Beckman, currently qualified 4th in this one. That lap time for Ollie Taylor, 2 personal best sectors and then an outright fastest 3rd sector. And here arrives Dan Lloyd on the scene. So his first sector is a personal best, of course. Mind you, so too is Ollie Taylor. So Ollie Taylor could be on for an even quicker lap here. It's a job to know where to look. Dan Lloyd's been well and truly balked by the back markers, but drivers on in and out laps there. So this lap time's gone. So I wonder where Ollie Taylor is. He's somewhere in the middle sector, and he's done a personal best first sector on the lap. And he only needs to, find 0.8 of a second. Here he comes at the back of the shot now. So the red and yellow car, Ollie Taylor, second in the championship, trying desperately to close in on this man, Dan Lloyd, the championship leader, and those 11 championship points for pole position would go a long way towards closing that gap. Let's just hope he doesn't catch this group of slow cars though before the end of the lap comes. So Dan Lloyd heading up towards Druids, but this lap pretty much scuppered now, you'd have to say, by the traffic that he encountered. So it will be his next lap that's likely to be his first significant attempt at pole position. Where is Ollie Taylor though? He hasn't yet caught this group of cars. His middle sector isn't brilliant though, so it may be a small improvement for Ollie. I don't think it's going to be enough for pole position. So Dan Lloyd out of the final turn, Lodge corner, comes across the start-finish line. Let's try this again. That lap time, unsurprisingly, is still the slowest in the session. This time around, with clear track, he'll be looking to try and go as quickly as possible. So out of Old Hall corner he goes, down towards Cascades. Clear track in front of him this time around. And Dan Lloyd, we know is quick. The car just a little bit twitchy there as it turned into Cascades. And that's going to be a result, I'm sure, of the 60 kilos of compensation weight in the car. Ollie Taylor, by the way, aborted that lap. He's coming into the pit lane. So the top 3 drivers in the session all in the pit lane. So the one to really watch here is Dan Lloyd. Stuart Lyons and Rob Gilmore also doing personal best first sectors. Dan's first sector, interestingly, is not quite as quick as he went last time around, but of course at this part of the circuit in sector 2 he then got caught up in amongst some of the cars still trying to warm their tyres up. Very aggressive over the curbs there through the chicane for Dan, right out to the edge of the road but not beyond it. That was nicely done. The car really working well through that sequence of corners. So he now drops down the hill in towards the Hislop chicane. Car skittering around, hammers the curb, a bit too much though, a bit too aggressive over the curb. That'll cost him maybe a 10th or so. We are starting to see the timing screen light up with personal best sectors, and that is iffy as well, I think, as far as track limits are concerned for Dan, as he just ran out over the edge of the curve at Knickerbrook. What's his middle sector? It's a personal best, unsurprisingly, but also setting personal best sectors are Lewis Kent, Derek Palmer, Stuart Lyons, Rob Gilmore, so we're going to see a real shuffle in the order, I think, in the next minute or so. Dan will be the first of those drivers, I believe, to complete a lap, though, so down in towards Lodge Corner he goes. The championship leader in TCR UK, languishing down at the back of the grid at the moment, but this lap time is almost certainly going to send him up the order. How high up the order is the question, though. Across the start-finish line he goes, and Dan Lloyd goes third quickest, and only 5/100ths of a second slower than Ollie Taylor. So Dan Lloyd, that is a lot more like it, goes on to the inside of row number 2. Stuart Lyons has got 6th, by the way, with his personal best lap time of the session. Derek Palmer has done 2 personal best sectors as well, so the Alfa Romeo could be about to leap up from 8th on the grid. There's Ollie Taylor getting ready to go out there and put in another few laps in the closing 7 minutes or so of the session, but he's going to have to go some, I think, to beat the time set by his teammate Ashley Sutton. Here's Derek Palmer. Now, Derek Palmer is currently 8th quickest in number 61 Alfa Romeo. This lap time puts him 5th, so much improved there for Derek Palmer. Good to see the Alfa Romeos, touch wood, running really well in this session. Derek, as I said, goes 5th. Rob Gilmore down in 9th at the moment, but at least the car is running and they're getting much needed laps under their belt. So confirmation of the order as it is now then. Ashley Sutton quickest by nearly 8/10ths over Ollie Taylor, but then it's very, very tight. Ollie is only 5/100ths quicker than Dan Lloyd, who is 3rd. Andreas Beckman is 4th. Derek Palmer, who we've just seen jump up into 5th position, and Jessica Beckman in 6th place. And in fact, both of those 2 drivers on personal best first sector, so Derek Palmer going quicker again this time around. He's only 66/1000ths of a second away from a second row starting position, and that would be a real boost in morale for the DPE Motorsport team. If you can get this car onto the second row of the grid, there is some real potential there. So Derek Palmer on a real flyer. He's the fastest car out there at the moment on the track, and could he be about to leap up onto the second row of the grid? Lewis Kent has had a lap time disallowed for exceeding track limits at Old Hall Corner. Jessica Beckman, who we're following on the screen now, did a personal best in the first sector. Middle sector wasn't brilliant, but let's see what she can do at the end of the lap. Jessica Beckman crosses the start-finish line and will stay in 7th place, so no improvement. What of Derek Palmer? His middle sector was not an improvement either. Andreas Beckman, though, who's not far behind him on the road, has done a personal best first sector as well, so we could yet see some improvements, but are the tyres now just starting to go past their best? Derek Palmer down in towards the final corner at Lodge Corner. The toe loops there, just flapping in the wind. Fabric toe loops on the front and rear of the car, nothing to worry about there. He crosses the line, and Derek Palmer, it's not quite enough to improve in the end, so he stays in 5th position. Stuart Lyons, Jessica Beckman, Andreas Beckman, all on personal best first sectors. Lots of drivers seem to be finding time in the first sector. It's more the second and third sectors where they're struggling, because of course by the time you get there, you've had the best of your tyres. But Andreas Beckman's done a green first and second sector, so Andreas Beckman in car number 19 will be one of the next cars across the line, I'd imagine, and he could be about to move ahead of his teammate Dan Lloyd, would you believe? He's only 6/10ths behind Dan at the moment. What sort of lap time can Andreas do? We're seeing Ash Sutton there down in the pit lane, taking it nice and easy, just waiting and biding his time before he heads back out on the circuit. Looking towards the timing screen, but we'll catch up on Andreas in a moment or two. First of all, let's head down to the pits with Bryn.
Yeah, thanks, Andy. If you look over there, you can currently see Josh in deep chats. That's Josh Files. He's advising the team, really, at Pyro Motorsport about what they can do. And if you look at the lap times that Ash Sutton's put in, he's actually only run 6 laps here. He's got the fastest lap at the moment, or he did last time I had a look, and they're discussing whether or not they actually need to go out and do any more laps, because, of course, qualifying for race 2 is done by the second fastest lap time, so it might be that they stick with where they're currently at. Ash is still sitting in the car, waiting for instruction, but they're in deep conversation about what they're going to do. I would suspect that Ash is going to stay exactly where he is. He won't put in any other laps, and he's going to try and get some poor second fastest lap time to enable him to be high up the grid for race number 2.
Although Ollie Taylor has just done a personal best middle sector, although he's 8/10ths behind at the moment. Andreas Beckman's lap time that we were following, by the way, it was an improvement. He was 6/10ths slower than Dan Lloyd. He's now 6/100ths slower than Dan Lloyd, but his next lap isn't all that brilliant. Here's Ollie Taylor then, personal best in the middle sector. If anything else, he just wants to really make this second place on the grid a bit more secure. Up across the timing line he's about to come, and Ollie Taylor crosses the line and improves fractionally. So instead of being 4 100ths ahead of Dan Lloyd, he's now 5 100ths ahead, but stays second. So it's still a Pyro Motorsport 1-2, and then we've got a West Coast Racing 3-4 with Dan Lloyd ahead of Andreas Beckman. Derek Palmer for DPE Motorsport is 5th, and the Maximum Motorsport Cupra on Stuart Lyons is 6th. Ollie Taylor's on the grass there, coming out of Cascades. That nearly went wrong. Jessica Beckman there is 7th quickest. Lewis Kent, is 8th. Rob Gilmore is 9th. Carl Swift is 10th. And Tim Docker rounding out the runners in 11th place at the moment. So the times, though, incredibly tight. If you take Tim Docker out of the equation at the back end of the grid, the biggest gap between any two cars is 7/10ths, and that's between Sutton and Taylor. Here's a replay of Ollie. That's what I spoke about to Bryn before the qualifying session got underway. The camber just drops away as you come out of Cascades, and the car just wants to understeer out to the edge of the road, and he's lucky there not to do any damage. There's the Hyundai i30 of Lewis Kent, 8th quickest at the moment in this session, but to put that into context, he's only actually, let's have a look, a 44.4. If he could find 0.2 of a second, he'd be 3rd. It's really, really tight in the midfield, so he doesn't need to find all that much. But of course, it's easier said than done to find those fractions of a second. Ashley Sutton's still in the pit lanes, not feeling the pressure for the time being. Dan Lloyd, though, I can tell you, has just done a personal best in the first sector. So Dan Lloyd, the only driver out there at the moment, really looking to improve at this stage, and he is starting to go a little bit quicker. And the middle sector's a personal best as well. So Ollie Taylor's second place on the grid might not be secure. Ashley Sutton's pole position might not be secure, and that's why he's heading back out onto the circuit. Oh no, Dan's been off though. Dan's been off wide at Druids, and that surely has scuppered this lap. He'll have dirt on his tyres now, arriving down at Lodge Corner, and you can see that telling there. The car gets sideways as he pitched it in, and I'm fairly sure his chances of making a significant improvement have gone by the wayside. We'll follow him across the line anyway. The lap time is good enough for second place, so it's still an improved lap time. There may be a question over track limits there. He's got time for one more lap though as Dan Lloyd, and he's just gone second. Here's a replay, again just understeers wide over the curb. I'm fairly confident that's going to be looked at after the session. We'll keep our eyes towards the timing screen to see if we get any notification of lap times being disallowed, but Dan has one more lap in the bank. Right, Bryn, what have you got for us down in the pit lane?
Yeah, just a bit about Ash Sutton for you. So they have sent Ash out, as we can see, and the reason is they're trying to really cleverly work the system for race number 2. They looked at the times, and they're trying to work out where he needs to be for the second of his lap times, his second fastest qualifying lap time, and they've sent him out again, and they're really trying to work the system and trying to be a bit clever. At the moment, it's a real guessing game, though. No one's quite sure whether he should have gone or whether he should have stayed. Josh Files is certainly adamant he should have gone, and that is what has happened, so we'll see what happens over the next, minute or so.
Yeah, this is all about that second fastest time, because if you set 2 really quick times, yeah, you're at the front of the grid for one race, but then you're at the back of the grid for race 2, because we flipped the second fastest times, the top 10 anyway, to get the grid for race 2. So if you do one really quick one, good enough for pole, which Ash has done so far, and then a second lap that's good enough for sort of 8th or 9th or 10th, you'll be towards the front of the grid for race 2, and it's a balancing act to try and get that right. That's why they've made regulations that way, though, so that it is hard to play the system. But Ash is going back out there now, and let's see what sort of a lap time he puts on. Headlights are on, though, so he's on a bit of a flyer as he crosses the start-finish line. Nobody else is really improving, and Ash, I think, just about got there before the time ran out, so he timed that to perfection. Checkered flag is now out, but anybody who is currently on a lap is allowed to finish the lap, and it will therefore count towards the end of the session, but no one else is really putting in personal best lap times. Ash looks to be really backing it off, actually, so I wonder whether maybe is this part of the tactic, or is it that he actually didn't quite get to the line in time? Not too sure, but either way, Ash appears to have backed off, and I think we at least have our grid for race 1 set with Ashley Sutton in his debut in TCR UK, setting the fastest time by just under 0.6 of a second provisionally from Daniel Lloyd and Ollie Taylor 2nd and 3rd, but it doesn't look as though Ash is particularly on a quick lap this time around. Half of the grid are in the pit lane, and the other half just sort of casually bringing the cars back around, but Ashley Sutton looks to have done enough for pole position for race 1, and we'll await for confirmation, and hopefully we'll be able to give you confirmation of the grid for race 2 a little bit later on. But Ash Sutton playing the system, has he played it right? That will be the question. So Sutton from Lloyd, from Taylor, from Andreas Beckman and Derek Palmer is your top 5. That's probably not quite the top 5 you'd have predicted before the session got underway, with Stuart Lyons 6th, Jessica Beckman 7th, Lewis Kent 8th, Rod Gilmore 9th, Carl Swift 10th, and Tim Docker, I'm fairly sure that's his fastest time of the weekend so far, 47.1 in 11th place. Tim actually had a puncture in free practice earlier on as well, so it's good to see that Tim got the car out there. We heard that Lewis Kent had some dramas in practice as well, but all 11 cars got out there for qualifying, which is what we wanted to see, and it is so competitive. The gaps, as you'll see when we confirm the lap times in a moment or two, the gaps between the cars are extremely tight, and that bodes really well for an exciting pair of races later on today. So Ash Sutton, as we suspected, bringing the car back into the pit lane. He's not going to complete the lap, so he was the last car to see the checkered flag, therefore he is the last car into the pit lane to round out the session. The cars have to go into Parc Ferme, which is why Ash pulled sharp right into the Parc Ferme area. The rest of the cars that were already in the pit lane when the session finished, they're being pushed back down in towards Parc Ferme so they can have the post-qualifying scrutineering checks, check the cars are all legal, check that they pass scrutineering. If they do, then we will have an official grid, but we'll give you confirmation of that just before we get into race 1 later on. Don't forget, both races streamed live as well as qualifying, all in one day. So usually we would race on the Sunday, but we're racing on Saturday here at Oulton Park, and it's a single day format that's being used, and it seems so far to be fairly popular with people. There's Lewis Kent, who rounded the session out in 8th place after having a couple of lap times disallowed, but the Hyundai i30, which has potential, we know that. It's just a case of getting the consistency, I think, out of Lewis. Lewis arrives here 5th place in the championship, but only 6 points behind Jessica Beckman. So Lewis, who had himself a podium finish back at Brands Hatch. He's had 1 podium finish so far this year and a 4th place finish last time out at Castle Combe. So the speed has been improving as the year has gone on, and he could get himself into the top 3 or 4 in the championship before the end of the year. There's Tim Docker, who is sort of dipping his toe in the water this weekend and looking towards future inclusions in TCR UK. As I said, really nice to have a new name on board. A really good looking car as well, I think. That VW Golf GTI TCR car really suits the white and blue and grey paint scheme. And Tim Docker makes his way into the pit lane, and I think he's the final car that will make his way back around. So a breathless qualifying session, and here is confirmation of how it rounds out with Ashley Sutton on his debut in the championship on the pole position. It looked for most of the session like it would be a Pyro 1-2, but Dan Lloyd, championship leader, on his last flying lap, gets up there onto the front row of the grid. You can never count him out, can you? So it's Sutton from Lloyd on the front row. Row 2 will be Ollie Taylor and Andreas Beckman, 2nd and 3rd respectively in the championship, 3rd and 4th on the grid for this race, but the top 4 covered by 9/10 of a second. It's very tight indeed. Derek Palmer is 5th in the first of the Alfa Romeo Giuliettas. Stuart Lyons is 6th in the first of the Maximum Motorsport Cupras. And then Jessica Beckman 7th. Lewis Kent 8th in the Hyundai. Robert Gilmore in the 2nd of the Alphas, at least getting the full session under his belt though, which is great news. He's 9th place. And Carl Swift rounding out the top 10, but he will, the same as his teammate Stuart Lyons, they'll both tell you that they are much more racers than qualifiers. Well, the cars are all back in the pit garages now, and we can head down to Bryn, I believe, in the pit lane.
Yeah, thanks, Andy. I am with our pole sitter, and first time we've seen you in a car. I mean, you came out yesterday and did a pretty storming lap, but that was pretty remarkable work.
Yeah, for sure. Firstly, thanks to Vires and Connect Racing for obviously having me here this weekend. Finley's opted out this round, and it's meant that we can jump in. So yeah, first time in a TCR car yesterday, and since then it's been really good.
Now, with qualifying, it's always quite tricky because you know the fastest lap is conventional. Fastest lap gets you pole for race 1, but you have that little curveball of the 2nd fastest lap reverse grid top 10.
Yeah, for sure. Obviously, we wanted to try and get pole and make an impact for everyone that's involved, all the sponsors, Team Pyro. It's good to give the boys something. But yeah, the second one, as you said, you never know where you fare up. So I believe, like you said, there's a bit of head scratching going on, and even myself, I'm not quite sure where we've lined up for that second one.
So you were sitting in the car, you did 6 laps, and then you were sitting in the car for what seemed like an age, waiting to go out again, and then all of a sudden Josh said, just send him out for one more lap, one final lap. So was that a pushing lap, or was it just out there to remind yourself of what the layout was of the international circuit at Oulton Park?
No, well, the idea there was to obviously just to be on circuit, circulating with the correct tyres on. So if someone did pip us, we were ready to go for that last lap. So yeah, I believe that obviously the job was done early doors, so we could sit in the pit lane and enjoy the breeze through the car, and not soaking up the temperature.
Absolutely. Now, you're on pole position for the first race, so I imagine that you're just going to be looking forward and hoping to bring it back in first. It's got decent pace, this car, isn't it?
Yeah, the car's mega. Pyro Motorsport, Verizon Connect Racing, they've done a mega job on the setup. It's brilliant on a one lap when you need it in qualifying to deliver that ultimate lap, and then come racing, it seemed to hold up on the front tyres. So me switching back to front wheel drive from rear wheel drive is going to be a learning curve on tyre management, but anything's a challenge. I like a challenge.
And you've got a real challenge because you've got Dan directly behind you.
Yeah, for sure. And obviously teammate Ollie, he's going to be there in the mix. So we'll just have to see how it goes. And I'm looking forward to race 2 as well with a bit of battling.
Fantastic. Well, we're going to be watching this with a lot of keenness. Ash, well done.
Thank you. Cheers.
There you go. There's our pole sitter for race 1. Where he is for race 2 is yet to be discovered, but Ash is leading the way. He came in here to Oulton Park yesterday evening for a kind of a quick visit. Got in the car, put in a pretty quick lap, actually, has to be said, when it came to testing. But today, showing what a champion is, Ash Sutton is going to be leading the way. Join us back here at Oulton Park for the first race in, well, not too long, a couple of hours' time.